Homeless at 18. No family. No home. Just a letter and a key to a deserted train depot no one had opened in years. People said it was nothing. A forgotten, deserted train depot at the edge of a dying town. A place better left behind. But what they didn't know, that place was hiding the truth about her past, a truth someone had tried to erase forever. And the moment she stepped inside, everything began to come back. Before we continue, if stories like this stay with you, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. The first night, Adeline Parker slept without a roof over her head. The sky felt too big, like it had swallowed the world whole and left her standing alone in it. She was barely an adult, just turned 18, and everything she owned fit into a worn-out duffel bag that had seen better years. A couple of shirts, a pair of jeans, a toothbrush, and a thin silver locket that used to belong to a mother she could barely remember. That was it. No family, no plan, no place to go. People always say freedom feels good, but standing there on that cracked sidewalk, with cold air biting through her sleeves and the distant hum of traffic echoing like a reminder that life kept moving, Adeline didn't feel free. She felt erased, like she had slipped through the cracks of the world and nobody had noticed. That morning, she wandered into a quiet public library just to stay warm. The kind of place where nobody asks questions if you keep your head down. That's where she found a letter waiting for her. Not junk mail, not a bill. Something heavier. The envelope carried the name of a law firm, and inside it, a truth that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her life. Because somewhere far from that cold city street, a deserted train depot was waiting for her, and it had been waiting for a very long time. The envelope didn't look like much. That was the strange part. It wasn't dramatic or mysterious the way life-changing things are supposed to be. Just a plain, cream-colored envelope with her name written neatly across the front in black ink, Adeline Parker. No return address she recognized, no handwriting she could place. Still, it felt heavy in her hands, heavier than paper should feel. Adeline stood there in the quiet corner of the library, the faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Around her, people turned pages, typed softly on keyboards, lived their small, ordinary lives, and somehow, in that moment, everything in her world felt like it was about to shift. She slid her finger carefully under the seal. For a second, she hesitated. Because when you've spent your whole life expecting nothing, you learn to be afraid of anything that looks like hope. Then she opened it. Inside was a single folded letter and something else. A small, cold object slipped into her palm as she pulled the paper free. A key. Old. Brass. Slightly worn at the edges. The kind of key that didn't belong to an apartment or a locker. The kind of key that belonged to something permanent. Her breath caught. She unfolded the letter. The words were typed formal, precise, distant. Miss Parker, this letter serves to inform you that you are the sole beneficiary of the estate of Margaret Hale, deceased. Mrs. Hale was your maternal grandmother. Adeline blinked. Read it again. Then again. Her grandmother. The word didn't make sense in her head. It was like reading a language she didn't speak. Because as far back as she could remember, she had been told there was no one. No grandparents, no extended family, no one looking for her. Just a series of foster homes and temporary beds and adults who tried or didn't. And now, Mrs. Hale was your maternal grandmother. Was past tense. She kept reading. Per her final wishes, ownership of her property, located at 127 Redstone Crossing. Briar Glen is to be transferred to you upon your 18th birthday. The property is known locally as the Briar Glen Train Depot. Adeline's fingers tightened around the paper. Train Depot. The words felt distant, unreal, like something out of someone else's story. The enclosed key grants access to the main entrance. Additional documents will be provided upon request. Her eyes moved to the bottom of the page. There was one more line, different from the rest. Not typed, handwritten. The ink slightly uneven, like it had been written slowly, carefully. Tell her. I never stopped waiting. Adeline didn't realize she had stopped breathing until her chest started to ache. Waiting. For her. That didn't make sense. Nothing about this made sense. She lowered the paper slowly, her hand trembling just enough for her to notice. Somewhere across the room. A chair scraped softly against the floor. A phone buzzed. Life continued. But inside her, something cracked. Because if this was true, if even a part of it was true, then everything she had believed about her life, about being unwanted, about being alone, was a lie. Adeline. The voice pulled her back. She looked up to see Ms. Caldwell, the librarian, watching her from behind the desk. Concern softened her expression. You okay, honey? Adeline opened her mouth, closed it again. I think I have a grandmother, she said finally. The words sounded strange out loud. Fragile. Like they might break if she said them too loud. Ms. Caldwell blinked, then stepped around the desk, walking toward her slowly. That sounds like a good thing, she said gently. Adeline shook her head, her grip tightening around the letter. She's gone. A pause. But she left me something. She held out the paper. Ms. Caldwell read it carefully, her brows drawing together, then lifting slightly in surprise. A train depot, she murmured. Adeline nodded. I don't even know where this place is. Briar Glen, Ms. Caldwell said thoughtfully. That's a few hours out, small town. Used to be bigger when the rail line was still active. Adeline looked down at the key in her hand. It felt heavier now, like it carried more than metal, like it carried answers. Or maybe more questions. Why would she leave this to me? Adeline whispered. Ms. Caldwell studied her for a long moment. Maybe because she wanted you to find something, she said softly. Or maybe she wanted you to know you were never really alone. Adeline swallowed hard, because that was the one thing she had always been certain of. And now, even that certainty was slipping away. The bus ride out of the city felt longer than it should have. Adeline sat by the window, her duffel bag pressed against her legs, the letter folded carefully inside her jacket pocket, and the key she kept in her hand, turning it over and over between her fingers. As the city faded into open roads, as buildings gave way to trees, as noise gave way to silence, she couldn't stop thinking about that last line. I never stopped waiting. Who waits for someone they've never met? Who holds on that long? And why? Why had no one ever told her? The bus slowed as it rolled into Briar Glen. It wasn't much. A single main street, a few scattered buildings. The kind of place people pass through without remembering. Adeline stepped off onto the gravel shoulder, the late afternoon sun stretching long shadows across the ground. The air smelled different here. Cleaner, quieter, almost like the world had taken a breath and decided to hold it. She adjusted the strap of her bag and looked down at the address scribbled on the back of the letter. 127 Redstone Crossing. She started walking, each step slower than the last, because with every block she passed, with every turn she took, the reality of it settled deeper into her chest. At the end of the road, She saw it. The train depot. Old, weathered, silent. Tracks stretching out behind it like forgotten lines in a story no one finished. The windows were dusty, but not broken. The doors closed, but not abandoned. It didn't feel empty. It felt waiting. Adeline stopped at the edge of the platform. Her heart was pounding now. Not from the walk. From something else. Something deeper. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the key. For a moment, she just stood there. A girl who had nowhere to go, holding the key to a place she didn't understand. Left behind by someone who had spent a lifetime waiting for her. Then slowly, she walked forward. The key didn't slide in easily. For a second, Adeline thought maybe it wouldn't fit at all, like this whole thing had been some kind of mistake. Like she had come all this way just to stand in front of a door that wasn't really hers. But then, a soft click. The sound echoed louder than it should have in the still air. Adeline froze. Her hand stayed on the handle. Her breath caught somewhere between fear and something she didn't quite recognize yet. Hope, maybe. Or the fear of hope. Slowly, she pushed the door open. The smell hit her first. Not dust, not decay, not the stale emptiness she had expected from a place left behind. It was something warmer. Old wood, faint traces of oil and metal, and beneath it something softer, something human. Like the ghost of a place that had once been alive and somehow refused to let go of it. Adeline stepped inside. The floorboards creaked gently beneath her weight, the sound echoing through the wide, open space. Sunlight slipped through the tall windows, cutting across the room in long golden lines, catching particles in the air that danced like they had been waiting to be seen again. The depot was bigger than she imagined. A wide, central hall stretched out in front of her, with rows of wooden benches lined up neatly as if passengers might walk in at any moment and take their seats. But that wasn't what stopped her. It was the fact that everything was clean. Not perfectly new, but cared for. The benches were wiped down, the floors swept, the windows, though aged, had been cleaned recently enough to let the light in. This place hadn't been abandoned. Not really. Someone had been here. Adeline took another step, then another. Her heart was beating louder now, each pulse echoing in her ears as she moved deeper inside. "Hello," she called softly. Her voice sounded too small in the empty space. No answer. Just silence. But not the kind of silence that felt empty. The kind that felt full. Like something was waiting just beyond it. She turned slowly, taking it all in. The ticket booth stood off to the side, its small window polished, the wooden counter worn smooth by hands that had passed over it thousands of times. A chalkboard hung behind it. Schedules. Or at least, what used to be schedules. The writing was faded, but not gone. Names of places she had never been. Times that no longer mattered. And then, she saw it. Along the far wall, photographs. Dozens of them. Maybe more. Framed carefully. Arranged in rows that stretched from one end of the depot to the other. Adeline's steps slowed. Something in her chest tightened. Because she already knew. Before she even got close, she knew what she was going to see. Her fingers brushed the edge of the first frame. Inside it, a young woman stood on the very same platform outside. Dark hair pulled back, wind catching loose strands, her smile wide and unguarded. And her eyes. Adeline's breath caught. They were her eyes. The same shape, the same quiet intensity. Her mother, younger than Adeline had ever imagined her. Alive in a way that felt impossible. She moved to the next photo. And the next. Each one told a story. her mother laughing with the conductor. Standing inside this very depot, leaning over the counter, dust on her hands. Sitting on a bench, looking off into the distance like she was waiting for something or someone. Adeline reached out, her fingers trembling as they hovered just above the glass. "I don't remember you," she whispered. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Soft, broken. "I wish I did." Her chest tightened. Her throat burned. Because standing there, surrounded by pieces of a life she had never been part of, she felt it. Not just loss, but something deeper. Something she had never allowed herself to believe in. Belonging. At the end of the wall, the photograph stopped, abruptly. Leaving a wide, empty space, Adeline frowned slightly, stepping closer. There, pinned carefully to a small corkboard, was a single piece of paper, yellowed at the edges. Handwritten. She leaned in, her heart pounding again. "And read. This space is for Adeline when she comes home." The words didn't just land. They shattered something inside her. Home. The word echoed in her mind like it didn't belong there, like it had been meant for someone else. But it was written there. Clear. Certain. Waiting. Adeline's knees weakened. She reached out, pressing her palm flat against the empty wall. It was cool beneath her skin. Real. Solid. A place that had been held for her. Long before she even knew it existed. Long before she knew she had anyone left in this world. Behind her. A soft sound. Adeline turned quickly. Her breath caught again. Because she hadn't heard the door. Hadn't heard footsteps. But someone was there. Standing near the entrance. Watching her. An older man. Tall, slightly hunched. His face lined with time and something heavier. His eyes locked onto hers with a quiet intensity that made her heart skip. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then finally, his voice came low, rough, and filled with something she couldn't quite name. "You got her eyes," he said. A pause. He swallowed slightly. "Been a long time since I've seen those." Adeline's fingers tightened at her side. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely steady. The man took a slow step forward, not threatening, just certain. "My name's Walter Hayes," he said. His gaze moved briefly to the photographs, then back to her. "I was your grandmother's neighbor. Another step, and I've been keeping this place ready." His voice softened. "Just in case you ever walked through that door." Adeline didn't move, didn't breathe, because in that moment, everything shifted. Not just the truth about her past, but the shape of her future. Because this place, this forgotten depot filled with memories, wasn't empty. It had never been empty. It had been waiting. For her. Adeline didn't realize she was still holding her breath until it left her all at once. Slow, shaky, like something inside her had finally given way. She turned back toward the wall, the photographs, the empty space, the note that had been waiting for her long before she even knew this place existed. Then she looked at Walter Hayes again. "You knew her?" Adeline asked quietly. Walter gave a small nod, his eyes drifting past her, settling somewhere deep in the past. "Knew her," he murmured. "I watched that woman sit on that bench out there every evening for years." He pointed toward the platform outside. Same time, same spot. Adeline followed his gaze. She'd bring a cup of tea, sometimes a blanket when it got cold, he continued, and she'd just sit there, watching the road like she expected someone to come walking up. A pause. "She talked about you like you were just running late." Adeline's chest tightened. "That doesn't make sense." she said, almost too quickly. She didn't know me, she couldn't have. Walter looked at her, then really looked at her. That's where you're wrong, he said softly. She knew you were out there. The words didn't sit right. They didn't fit the story Adeline had been told her whole life. There was no one, she said, her voice trembling now. That's what they said. My mom's family, gone. No one wanted me. Walter's jaw tightened slightly. They told you that, huh? Adeline nodded. He exhaled slowly, like the air carried something heavy with it. Your grandmother never believed that story, he said. Not for a second. A silence settled between them, but this time it felt different. Not empty, not waiting, but full of something rising to the surface. Truth. She got a phone call. Walter continued after a moment. Right after your mother passed. Adeline's heart skipped. From your father. The word hit harder than she expected. She hadn't heard it spoken like that in a long time. Danny Parker, Walter added quietly. He told her that you didn't make it. The room tilted. Just slightly. Enough for Adeline to feel it. That's not... She started, then stopped. Because it wasn't true. She was standing right there. Breathing. Alive. He told her you were gone. Walter repeated. Said there wasn't a service. Said it all happened too fast. Adeline's fingers curled into her palms. And she believed him, she asked. Walter shook his head. No. That answer hit harder than anything else. Because belief would have been easier. Cleaner. But this was something else entirely. She tried to find you, Walter said, for years. He moved slowly toward the wall of photographs, his fingers brushing lightly across one of the frames. She went to offices, made calls, wrote letters. I'd see her come back here with stacks of papers, sit at that desk in the back, and start again the next day. Adeline swallowed hard. How long, she whispered. Walter didn't hesitate. Long enough for most people to give up. A pause. She never did. Something inside Adeline shifted. Not all at once. Not like a switch flipping. More like a crack spreading through something she had believed was solid. She knew you were alive. Walter continued. Said it didn't make sense. No records, no proof. Just a story that didn't sit right with her. He gave a faint, almost sad smile. She used to say, a heart doesn't just stop knowing. Adeline looked down at her hands. They were trembling again, but not from fear this time. From something deeper, something she didn't know how to hold. She built this place for you, Walter said. Adeline's head snapped up. What? Walter gestured around them. The depot was already here, sure, but it was falling apart. Nobody cared about it anymore. He took a slow breath. She bought it, fixed it, cleaned it up, kept it alive. For me, Adeline asked, barely above a whisper. Walter nodded. She said, if you were out there, you'd need somewhere to come back to. The words hit her like a wave. Not loud, not sudden, but unstoppable. Because for the first time in her life, there was evidence, not just that someone had loved her once, but that someone had kept loving her every single day, even when the world said she was gone. Adeline turned slowly, looking around the depot again. The clean floors, the polished windows, the photographs, the empty space on the wall. It wasn't just a building. It was proof that she had mattered to someone, that she had been missed, that she had been waited for. She knew she was running out of time. Walter said quietly. Adeline's chest tightened again. She got sick, real sick. He paused, his voice lowering. That's when she asked me to help. Adeline looked at him. "I didn't do much," he added quickly. "Just kept the place clean. Made sure nothing fell apart." A small shrug. "Paid the bills she left behind." He met her eyes again. "Told her I'd keep the door unlocked, just in case." Adeline blinked rapidly, trying to hold everything together. Why, she asked. Not accusing. Just needing to understand. Walter didn't hesitate. "Because she believed you were coming." The words landed softly, but they echoed, loud. Inside her chest, inside her mind, inside every empty space she had carried her whole life. Adeline let out a shaky breath. She turned back toward the wall, the empty space still waiting for her. And for the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider looking in. She felt like someone who had finally found where she was supposed to be. Not because she earned it. Not because she fought for it. But because someone else had never stopped believing she belonged there. "She left something for you," Walter said after a moment. Adeline looked at him. "In the office, back there." He nodded toward a hallway she hadn't noticed before. "She told me if you ever showed up." His voice softened again. "Make sure you find it." Adeline stood still for a moment. Then slowly, she nodded. Her feet felt heavier now. Not from fear, but from the weight of everything she was beginning to understand. She wasn't alone. She never had been. Someone had been searching for her, fighting for her, waiting for her. And now, she was here. Adeline stood at the entrance to the narrow hallway for a long time before she moved. It wasn't fear that held her there. Not exactly. It was something quieter. The kind of hesitation that comes when you realize whatever is waiting on the other side of that door might change you in a way you can't undo. Behind her, the depot sat in stillness. The benches, the photographs, the empty space on the wall that had been waiting for her name. In front of her, answers. Or maybe something even harder than answers. Truth. "You don't have to open it yet," Walter said gently from behind her. Adeline didn't turn around. "If I don't," she whispered, "I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what's inside." A pause. Then, quieter. "I've already done enough wondering." She reached for the handle. Her fingers lingered there for a moment, then tightened. The door creaked softly as it opened. The office was small, simple, but it carried a weight the rest of the depot didn't. Like this was where the real story had been lived. A wooden desk sat beneath the window, its surface neat but worn, papers stacked carefully. A lamp with a soft yellow glow. A chair pushed in like someone had stood up and meant to come back. Adeline stepped inside slowly. The air felt different here, closer, more personal, like she had just walked into someone's thoughts. On the desk, an envelope, thick, cream-colored. Her name written across the front in careful, deliberate handwriting. Adeline Parker. Not typed, not formal, human, intentional. Her chest tightened again. She moved closer, each step slower than the last. Because this wasn't just a letter. This was something that had been meant for her. Only her. Her fingers brushed the edge of the envelope. The paper was smooth but firm, like it had been chosen carefully, like someone had wanted it to last. She picked it up. It felt heavier than it should have, just like the first one. Behind her, Walter didn't speak, didn't move. He understood. Some moments, you don't interrupt. Adeline ran her thumb along the seal. For a second, her hands trembled. Because suddenly, this wasn't about a building anymore, or a mystery, or even the past. This was about something far more fragile. The possibility that someone had loved her enough to leave a message behind. She opened it. Inside, pages, several of them, folded carefully, and tucked behind them, a photograph. Adeline pulled the photo out first. A woman stood on the platform outside the depot. Older now, silver threaded through her hair, lines etched into her face not from age alone, but from time, from waiting, from holding on to something that refused to fade. Her arms were open, not wide, not dramatic, just enough, like she had been standing there, expecting someone to step into them. Adeline's vision blurred. She blinked quickly, but it didn't help, because something inside her chest had already begun to break open. She turned the photo over, on the back in soft pencil, still waiting. Her breath caught, and this time, she couldn't hold it together. A tear slipped free before she even realized it was coming. Slowly, she unfolded the first page of the letter. Her hands shook, but she didn't stop. "My dearest Adeline." The words hit her like a whisper from somewhere she had never been but somehow recognized. If you are reading this, then you found your way home. Adeline's knees weakened slightly, and she reached for the edge of the desk to steady herself. Home. That word again. But this time, it didn't feel foreign. There's something you need to know before anything else. You were never forgotten. Her breath hitched. Not for a single day. The room went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that empties you. The kind that fills every space inside you until there's no room left for doubt. I looked for you in every place I could think of. I asked questions people didn't want to answer. I knocked on doors that stayed closed. And when the world told me you were gone, I chose not to believe it. Adeline pressed the paper tighter in her hands. Her tears blurred the ink, but she kept reading. Because she had to. Because for the first time in her life, someone was telling her the truth. I knew you were out there. I felt it in the same way a heart knows how to keep beating without being told. And so, I kept this place alive. Adeline looked up. Her eyes moved slowly across the office, then beyond it, into the depot itself. Everything suddenly made sense. The clean floors, the polished windows, the photographs, the empty space on the wall. This depot, it's not just a building. It's a promise, a place where you could come back to, even if you didn't know you had somewhere to return to. Her lips trembled, because all her life, she had believed she had nowhere to go. Now she realized, there had always been a place, waiting. You may not understand everything right now. You may feel angry, or lost, or unsure of what to do next. That's all right. A beginning doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be yours. Adeline lowered the letter slowly. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, because something inside her had shifted again. Not just her past, not just her understanding, but her future. For the first time, she wasn't standing at the edge of nothing. She was standing at the beginning of something. She looked down at the letter again, then at the photograph, then out through the office door, into the depot. This place wasn't just something she had inherited. It was something she had been given. A chance, a second beginning, a life that had been waiting quietly until she was ready to step into it. Adeline wiped her face with the back of her hand, took a slow breath, and whispered, "I'm here." The first morning, Adeline woke up in the depot. She didn't remember where she was. For a few quiet seconds, she lay still on the narrow cot in the back office, staring up at the ceiling. Her mind caught somewhere between past and present. Then it came back to her. The letter, the photographs, the empty wall that had been waiting for her name. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to leave. The depot was cold that morning. Not painfully so, just enough to remind her that this place hadn't been lived in the way a home is. Not yet. Adeline sat up slowly, pulling her jacket tighter around her shoulders. The silence pressed in gently, not threatening, not lonely, just waiting. She stood, walked into the main hall, and paused. Sunlight spilled across the wooden floor again, just like the day before. Only now, it felt different. Less like something she had stepped into, more like something she belonged inside. Walter was already there. Of course he was. He stood near the ticket booth, wiping down the counter with a cloth that had clearly seen years of use. He glanced up when he heard her footsteps. "Morning," he said simply. Adeline nodded. "Morning." A pause. Then, almost without thinking, she asked, "What needs fixing first?" Walter didn't smile. Not fully, but something in his eyes shifted. "Everything," he said. Then, after a beat, "But we can start small." And that's how it began. Not with some big decision, not with a plan. Just small things. Adeline started with the benches. She wiped them down one by one, running her hands over the wood, feeling every scratch, every groove left behind by people who had once passed through. She didn't rush, didn't try to finish quickly, because something about the work felt important. Like she wasn't just cleaning, she was remembering. In the afternoons, she opened the windows. Let the air move through the depot again. Let the dust settle where it wanted to. Let the place breathe. Sometimes she would stand by the tracks and just listen. To nothing. To everything. To the quiet hum of a place that had been holding its breath for years. People started noticing. Not all at once. Not in a big way. Just slowly. A man from down the road stopped by one afternoon. Said he used to pass through this station when he was a kid. He stood there for a while, looking around, then nodded to Adeline before leaving. The next day, he came back with a toolbox. Didn't say much. Just started fixing a loose board near the platform. A woman brought flowers. Set them on the windowsill without asking where they should go. They belonged here, she said. And somehow, Adeline knew she was right. By the end of the week, the depot didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive. Not loud, not crowded, just quietly full of people who remembered what it used to be and wanted to see what it could become. Adeline found herself changing too. Not in big, obvious ways, but in the small spaces. She stood a little straighter, spoke a little more, looked people in the eye when they talked to her. She started learning names, remembering stories, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. At night, she would sit at the desk in the office, the letters spread out in front of her. Sometimes she would read it again, not all of it. Just pieces, lines that stayed with her. You were never forgotten. This place is a promise. A beginning doesn't need to be perfect. She began to understand something. This depot wasn't just something she had inherited. It was something she had been trusted with. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the tracks in gold, Adeline stood in the main hall, looking around. The benches were clean, the windows open, the photographs catching the light just right, and the empty wall. Still waiting. Walter walked in behind her. He followed her gaze. "You're thinking about something," he said. Adeline nodded slowly. "I don't think this place was meant to stay the way it was," she said. Walter tilted his head slightly. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then turned to face him. "I think it was meant to keep going." A pause. not as a station. Her eyes moved around the room, but as something else. Walter didn't answer right away. He just watched her, waiting. A place where people can come. Adeline continued, not to catch a train, but to find something. Like what he asked? Adeline thought about it. About the girl she had been just days ago. Standing on a sidewalk with nowhere to go, believing she didn't belong anywhere. Each other, she said quietly. The words hung in the air. Simple, but true. Walter nodded once. Slow, thoughtful. Your grandmother would have liked that, he said. Adeline looked back at the empty wall, then at the photographs, then at the door that had once been closed to her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't trying to survive the next day. She was building something. Something real. Something lasting. She took a step forward, then another, until she stood right in front of the empty space on the wall. Her space. She reached out, pressing her hand against it again. But this time, it didn't feel like something she was trying to understand. It felt like something she was ready to fill, not with what she had lost, but with what she was about to create. It didn't happen all at once. The depot didn't suddenly fill with noise or laughter or life overnight. Change came the way it always does in places like that. Quietly, gently, one person at a time. At first, it was just mornings. A few people stopping by on their way to somewhere else. Not because they had to, but because they were curious. Because the old depot, the one everyone thought was forgotten, had its doors open again. Adeline made coffee in the back office. Nothing fancy. Just something warm. Something simple. She'd set it out on the counter near the old ticket booth, along with a small sign she wrote by hand. Stay as long as you need. Most people didn't say much. Not at first. They'd come in, look around, take a seat on one of the benches and just sit. Some stared at the photographs. Some looked out toward the tracks. Some just closed their eyes, like they were remembering something they hadn't thought about in years. Adeline didn't interrupt. She didn't ask questions. She had learned something important. Sometimes people don't come looking for answers. They come looking for space. And that's what the depot became. A space. By the second week, more people came. A mother with a little boy who liked to run up and down the platform, pretending to catch invisible trains. An older couple who used to meet there when they were young. Now sitting side by side in quiet understanding. A man who brought a guitar and played softly in the corner, the notes echoing through the high ceilings like something the building had been waiting to hear again. And slowly, the silence changed. It wasn't gone, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with something else, something warmer, something alive. Adeline noticed it one afternoon. She was standing near the doorway, watching the light stretch across the tracks, when she heard it. Laughter, soft, real. Coming from inside, she turned, and for a moment, she just stood there, and taking it in. People were talking, smiling, sharing stories, like they had always belonged there. Like the depot had never been abandoned at all. Walter stepped up beside her, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the room. Listen to that, he said quietly. Adeline nodded. Her chest felt tight, but not in the way it used to. It's not quiet anymore, she said. Walter shook his head gently. No, he said. It's not. Adeline looked back out at the tracks. They were still empty. No trains. No schedules. No destinations written in chalk. But somehow, that didn't matter anymore. Because the depot had found something new to carry. Not passengers. Not cargo. But people, their stories, their memories, their moments of coming and going. And Adeline, she had changed with it. She no longer stood at the edge of rooms, unsure where she belonged. She didn't keep her eyes down or her voice quiet. She moved through the space with purpose now, with a kind of quiet confidence that didn't demand attention but didn't hide from it either. She remembered names, asked questions, listened, really listened. And sometimes, when someone walked through the door with that same look she used to carry, the look of someone unsure if they were allowed to be there, Adeline would meet their eyes, smile gently, and say, "You can stay." One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned that deep golden color that only lasts a few minutes, Adeline stood by the wall of photographs again, the same wall that had once taken her breath away, the same wall that had held her mother's story, her grandmother's hope, and now, her own beginning. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small photograph. It wasn't anything special, just something Walter had taken a few days earlier. Adeline standing in the doorway, light behind her. The depot open, alive. She looked at it for a moment, then stepped forward and pinned it to the empty space. Her space. For a second, she just stood there, taking it in, not as someone who had arrived late, not as someone who had missed out, but as someone who had finally come home. Behind her, the sound of the door opening, footsteps, voices, life continuing. Adeline turned, and instead of watching from a distance, she walked toward it, because she understood something now, something her grandmother had known all along. Home wasn't where you started. It was where someone kept the door open for you. And now, that door wasn't just open anymore. It was hers to hold. Adeline spent her whole life believing she was alone, that no one was waiting for her. But she was wrong. Somewhere, someone had kept a place for her without knowing if she'd ever come. That's the truth most people miss. Love doesn't always chase you. Sometimes it waits. And sometimes the place you think doesn't exist has been holding the door open for you all along. If you feel lost or alone, don't assume that's the end of your story. You might just be one step away from finding where you truly belong. And if you can't find that place yet, become it. Be the one who opens the door for someone else.